Shalom, everyone, and welcome to the ICEJ webinar series. Today, we are 2 months into Israel's war with Hamas down in Gaza. December 7, the war, of course, started with the horrible Hamas invasion on October 7th. And we're going to look today at the question of, can Israel achieve its war goals, the aims that it stated, set out at the very start of when it said it was at war with Hamas, different than past operations whenever they had rocket wars with Hamas in Gaza. And it's an important question. Can this nation achieve what it has set out to do? And to help us answer these questions, I have my friend, Professor Ephraim Inbar. Good to see you.
Good to see you, David.
Yes. Now, Professor Inbar taught for many years at Bar-Ilan University. He was the head of the Besa Center for Strategic Studies there, named in honor of Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. And he's now the founder and president of the Jerusalem Institute for Security and Strategy. It's another think tank here in Jerusalem. He's lectured not only at Bar-Ilan University on political science, but also at Georgetown University, Johns Hopkins, which has a very renowned foreign policy school, and Boston University. And we used to have Ephraim on a lot of times on our Front Page Jerusalem radio show over the years. He's one of these really go-to guys, a fixture here in Israel as an Israeli expert on the geopolitical, geostrategic situation here. He can handle a lot of different issues, but I'm glad since this war started, it's our first time to talk with you, Ephraim. And first of all, tell us, what was your reaction on October 7th? What happened and how colossal an intelligence failure was it?
Of course, on October 7th, I was in the synagogue and there were rumors that what happened. I didn't believe it. And of course, we were all very surprised. And after I learned the dimension of the massacres and the atrocities, like most Israelis, we were angry, very angry. Hamas, but also at our military and political leadership that allowed such a catastrophe to happen. So this was my initial response. I understood immediately that this is not a war. This, like any other previous military engagements, but it's a war to restore our deterrence. We lost deterrence. And in the Middle East, you cannot live without deterrence. You have to be strong, perceived to be strong. And it was clear to me from the very beginnings that we have to go and try to vanquish Hamas in order to teach them and all our enemies around here that will exact a high price from this type of attack.
Yeah, before we talk about Israel's war aims, let's talk about Hamas and their aims in launching this horrific pogrom on October 7th. They were trying to even get the Bedouin and the Negev to join in, to get all the way to Hebron. There's evidence they hope to get all the way to Hebron in Judea, Samaria, and the West Bank, and get the Palestinians to rise up there. They hoped Hezbollah would join, but it hasn't played out that way. Do you think they've achieved anything that they set out to do?
I think they achieved a major success. We should not overlook it. Mm-hmm. They not only broke through our defense lines, not only they surprised our intelligence, they also were successful in invading Israel, which didn't happen since 48. They were successful in killing a lot of civilians, in creating a shock among Israelis. This is part of their population-centric strategy. They understand that they cannot meet the Israeli army on the battlefield, so they try to change the mood in the country by attacking civilians. The missile attacks are against civilians. They want our civilians to suffer, hoping that one day we'll have enough and leave the country. This is the main object of Hamas. And they also succeeded in creating a refugee wave of almost 250,000 Israelis that left the area of, around the Gaza Strip, but also because Hezbollah did participate in a limited way, the area along the northern frontier. So I think they had a major success that we should not overlook it. And precisely because of their success, we have to respond in a very determined and unequivocal way.
It's basically, I have a slide here that shows Israel's war aims. And it's number one, to eliminate Hamas, especially its leadership, but its rank and file of fighters, terrorists. To number two, to return the hostages that were taken. And number three, to end the threat, military and terror threat to Israel from Gaza, to the Israel civilians, especially the communities along the border. And as we look at these three goals, especially this first one, let's look at it. Some are saying you might be able to eliminate a few leaders, but they always get replaced. And Hamas is basically an ideology. You can't wipe that out. But this is a big challenge. Eliminate Hamas, including political leaders abroad. How steep a challenge is this for Israel?
I think that Israel's goal is more modest than eliminate Hamas. We understand that Hamas is an ideological movement that unfortunately has tremendous appeal among the Palestinians. There are numbers, 60, 70, 80% of the Palestinians are supporting the terrorist attack on October 7, recent polls. So it's quite clear that we cannot eliminate Hamas, but we can eliminate their military capabilities. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, we have to conquer Gaza. We have to destroy all their military capabilities, which include military bases, includes their manufacturing of weapons capability, all their communication systems, of course, the tunnels. So there is a lot of work to do in Gaza in order to make sure that immediately after we complete this goal, they are unable to provide a security challenge to Israel. This is possible as long as Americans give us the time to do so. Mm-hmm. And the time element, excuse me, is very important. We need the time in order to do it, particularly if we want to minimize casualties on our part. And what we've seen so far is a very methodological, patient approach on part of the IDF in the invasion of Gaza. We advance slowly. We allow the Air Force, first of all, to soften the opposition, afterwards artillery, and only afterwards we go in with armored and infantry to clean the area. This requires time. By the way, our tactical successes are remarkable, particularly if we compare it to the American record in Fallujah or in other places where they fought urban warfare, which is very complicated and costly. So we need time. And this is obviously an achievable goal. We have the military power to do it. We have the tenacity. We have the spirit of the troops. We understand the importance of this war. So the only thing we are not sure about is the political clock. Mm-hmm. And we have already heard from Washington some complaints about how we are doing it and what is needed, and they are losing patience. And this is a problem for us. Hopefully, the American administration that has been very helpful to Israel so far will understand that this job needs time, and they will not pressure us to stop before we attain this important goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you say the U.S. role in the time clock, it has to do with the U.S. elections, which are now less than a month away. It'll be early November of next year. And Biden was losing some support among Democrats. The Democrats, it's very scary, 50-50, basically split down the middle, those who support Israel and those who support the Hamas in this. That's shocking to me as an American. But, yeah, you know, the U.S., one U.S. official said he thinks Israel can finish the job in Gaza by the end of January. Is that doable? The main cleaning.
Very difficult to say what is doable because we don't know the type of resistance we may face. It is doable probably by the end of January. I'm not sure we have the time that the Americans are willing to give us the time until January. End of January will be acceptable. And of course, afterwards, we have to clean the area. It's not, you know, you take the Gaza Strip and that's it. You have to go after, you collect intelligence, of course, and you go after Hamas operatives that can disappear among the civilian population. And all this takes time. It is a long operation. We understand it. We know it. We are ready to make the effort. I think even President Biden made it quite clear that this is not only a war about the security of Israel. It has repercussions for the free world. It will affect what's happening vis-a-vis the Russians. It will affect what happens vis-a-vis the Iranians and the Chinese. This trio is basically an anti-American alliance, and all of them are supporting Hamas.
Yeah. It was very troubling to see Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, welcomed in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi over the last day or so. And he really hasn't traveled much since the war started in Ukraine because he's under indictment for war crimes now, but he's going to countries that have not been, they haven't signed on the Rome Statute to recognize the International Criminal Court. But that's very troubling to see him welcome there.
I think by the Saudis. The war is a test also for the United States' credibility in helping its allies. It's quite clear that what's happening in Gaza is closely watched in Taipei, in Taiwan, in other places. And hopefully America will be able to prove that it is a reliable ally and the leader of the free world.
Yeah, were you surprised that President Biden has given Israel at least the leeway he has so far?
I was a little bit surprised, although I knew that he basically is a friend of Israel. I think he has some ulterior motives that I don't like trying to keep a nuclear deal with, tacit nuclear deal with Iran.
Mhm.
And this is one of the reasons why he sent the air carriers to the East Mediterranean in order to convince the Iranians not to escalate, because he doesn't want a confrontation with Iran. To a large extent, the American administration also ignores the attacks of another Iranian proxy, the Houthis, against the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. We don't see a strong American position there. I think that the Americans show too much restraint in face of the attacks of Iranian proxies on American forces in the Middle East. I hoped that there would be a stronger position, but that's life.
Yeah, the latest reports are that the U.S. has told Israel not to respond against these provocative attacks from Yemen. So far, Israel has, and the U.S. and the Saudis as well, have been able to shoot down most of these long-range drones and cruise missiles, other missiles that are being fired all the way from Yemen. But they want, it feels like the 1991 Gulf War, where Israel couldn't respond to the Scud missiles from Saddam Hussein.
We should not forget that the Biden administration stopped the aid to the Saudi Arabia,
yes,
in order to discontinue their war on the Houthis, which is the Iranian proxy. It's the beginning of this term. This administration basically ordered the Saudis to stop fighting the Houthis, and now they see the consequence.
Yeah, even the Saudis are telling Israel, show restraint, and because Israel says they're going to go for it. So when we look at these three goals, eliminate Hamas, and number three, end the threat from Gaza to Israel, basically the IDF is doing a good but slow, methodical job so far down there. It may take another month or two to root out, destroy tunnels, destroy weapons, root out the terrorists. But the whole thing of eliminating Hamas, especially its leadership, this gets into the long-term game, like after the Munich massacre, where Israel took its time to eliminate those involved in that. Do you see something similar here? They've said they'll do it.
We are trying to eliminate part of the military leadership already at this stage. We are largely successful with the intermediate hierarchy of Hamas. We are at Sinwar house already.
Yes.
He's not there. So we will continue to harass the Hamas leadership, the military, and I think there was an unfortunate leak that will harass them abroad. We shouldn't probably have said it, but it's well understood that we'll go after everybody because they are a real threat. And this is also what our Arab allies want. It's remarkable that Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, the Emirates, they have a very low-key response to our attack. Basically, in private, they tell us, go ahead, finish them off, because Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a Palestinian offshoot of the Palestinian, of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood movement, and which is an enemy of those regimes. So in private, they clap at what we are doing. Of course, in public, they are more restrained. And it is remarkable that we don't see any strong expressions of censorship of Israel from those capitals.
Yeah, it's getting into the return of the hostages issue. In this, these countries want to eliminate Hamas and the leadership. We're hearing that once the hostages are freed, then the U.S. is going to demand that Qatar kick the Hamas leadership out. But it seems like they'd have a home in Turkey now. Some of them are already there, but Erdogan has said Hamas leaders can come here and Israel better not touch them. There will be serious consequences for it. It looks like he wants to give them a home. And of course, Erdogan and his party are the Muslim Brotherhood of Turkey.
Yeah, you are correct. And by the way, Turkey allowed Hamas leaders to carry Turkish passports, which allows them to move freely in Europe and in other places. So Turkey, that is led by a Muslim Brotherhood person, shows his true colors. It is incredible that NATO has such an ally, and unfortunately there is no mechanism to throw out Turkey from the alliance, but I think the US administration should put much more pressure on the Turkish government to stop from showing such a friendship to a terrorist organization that is anti-American, clearly anti-American. I'm not talking about anti-Israeli. So the Turks play a very negative role. Qatar also plays a negative role. And Qatar, we shouldn't forget, not only supports Hamas financially, supports them diplomatically, but also puts at their disposal their Al Jazeera network, the most popular TV station in the Arab world, which is basically a voice for the Muslim Brotherhood, for a very radical Islamist organization. Qatar subsidizes radical Islamist propaganda. And I think that the Americans should pay attention to it. It definitely does not merit to be accepted as a non-NATO ally. It is a country that works actively against Western values and American interests.
It's hard to figure what, Erdogan out, because he was starting to warm up after his very cold shoulder, rough treatment of Israel for about a decade. He was ready to kiss and make up with Netanyahu. And then, with this, he is totally back 100% behind Hamas and says they're not terrorists, they're freedom fighters. Very troubling.
Yes, Erdogan also has influence in Central Asia. We shouldn't forget that there are many Turkic peoples there, and some of them are, torn between having an orientation, a pro-Russian orientation, a pro-Chinese orientation, or pro-Western orientation. And the example of Erdogan, particularly getting away with it in Washington, is not a good sign for them. It's not a good model for them becoming pro-Western. So the waves of the Turkish foreign policy are such that counter American interests in not only in the Middle East, but also in Central Asia, which is important strategic region.
Okay, this second goal Israel has stated, returning the hostages. They managed to get almost half of them back, the women and children. And the fact that it's, you had so many women and children, elderly women, babies and all, it's just horrific. The absolute war crimes that they committed. But what are the chances of getting the rest back? What are the obstacles?
We were very indeed successful, as you mentioned, to extract a large part of the women and children. There are still women and children in the hands of Hamas. We know that the conditions of their internment are very bad. They hardly get food. Obviously, they do not get medicines, particularly the elderly they need. And we've learned from those that have returned that the conditions were unbearable and have a deep negative psychological effect on them. There are children that only whisper, after a week or 2 weeks of being freed. Of course, the women were raped, and we have a moral duty to try to free them, but Hamas is not interested. Hamas violated the agreement, and they continue to keep them, and they demand an end to hostilities, which is, of course, not acceptable to us because we will not be able to attain the first goal, which we talked about. So we try to put, of course, military pressure on them. So far, it didn't help. We are also trying to collect intelligence, maybe to find where they are, to try to organize a rescue mission, as we did in Entebbe in 1976. So we actually were successful in rescuing one soldier at the beginning of the war. I'm sure we are working on those issues, but it's not easy. We have also a dilemma. One way of dealing with the tunnels is to flood them with water from the sea, and I think we are not doing it yet because we understand that if we flood the tunnels, we may hurt the kidnapped hostages. So we try, but it is a humanitarian issue for us, and it's we have to attain the first goal. This has, in my view, precedence.
Okay, I know one Hamas official says we're ready to resume negotiations over releasing more hostages. Of course, it's mainly men and soldiers that they still have, and they'll want a much higher price. But they said we won't start these negotiations until Israel withdraws. That's almost a non-starter. But I think it points out that Israel's huge military presence in Gaza now, that the Israeli military needs to hold on to Gaza as long as it can in order to ensure all three goals, that's the best leverage now going forward.
We have to conquer all Gaza and start cleaning it. The Israeli government announced that we do not plan to stay indefinitely in Gaza. And but for the interim period, we have to be there, as you said, and to try to decapitate the organization, to kill as many Hamas soldiers we can put our hands on, to try to also, there is another area in which we should put more effort, is the economic welfare. Part of the money they get from Qatar and other sources have to be dried up. So there is a long struggle that will be able to provide us with some time after the war is over, time not peaceful, that's too optimistic, but too presumptuous, but some time until we'll see again, and I'm sure we'll see again, new cells of Hamas getting organized. But what is very important for us after the war is to maintain freedom of action in Gaza. We have to continue to what we call the mow the grass in Gaza, as we do in Judea and Samaria. This is extremely important for us.
Yeah, this is getting down in the root system more than just mowing it. You have to go down in these tunnels. I think it's important for me that Israel stays there until it gets as much as it can before they ever start withdrawing. And I'd like to see Israeli leaders put more emphasis on completely revamping the education system in Gaza. Just as the U.S. had to denazify Germany, the U.S. and the Allies after World War II, there needs to be a denazification,
Massification.
Massification of especially the glorification of jihad.
I think that the Americans realize that if they want to place the Palestinian Authority into Gaza, they are talking about a revitalized, and I'm quoting, revitalized Palestinian Authority. Israel has to make clear to the United States what revitalization means. And obviously, you are very correct in observing that their education system has to be radically changed. There can be no longer schools called after martyrs, which are basically terrorists. They have to stop the incitement against Jews, against Israel. All this requires a great effort. I'm not sure that the Palestinian Authority will agree to that. And I think also they have also to stop giving out money to terrorists in Israeli jails and their families. Mm-hmm. This is simply unacceptable. Mm-hmm. There is an American law against it. So I think that the American administration should insist on certain conditions for a revitalized Palestinian Authority. We should coordinate with them their positions. Another issue that has to be discussed is the demise of UNRWA. Mm-hmm. This organization is an organization that preserves the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and rather ending it. Mm-hmm. So the Americans have a long list of things they have to make sure happen in order to see along the borders of Israel nice neighbors. Yeah. So far, we have very bad neighbors.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about UNRWA because I don't know if any UN institution should have a role in post-war Gaza, but it's very important that, you know, in all their schools, you not only find weapons and all, but indoctrination to hate, but it's important to teach the next generation to desire peace. Yeah.
I think Israelis are very skeptical of the United Nations. It's, in my view, a morally bankrupt institution. The Americans are paying for it. I would suggest the American taxpayer to demand loudly that his money should be spent better than on the United Nations. And indeed, Israel has very bad experience with United-led international forces. We have such an international force in the north, in Lebanon, that is supposed to keep Hezbollah away from Israeli border. Of course, they don't do anything about it. The Hezbollah are at Israel's border. This in defiance of the United Nations Security Council resolution 1701. And we all know the shortcomings of the UN, and particularly the United Nations, current General Secretary is a shame. He called for immediate ceasefire, basically helping Hamas. No, I don't think that Israel will agree to any UN presence in Gaza or a UN international force. I think the Palestinians should be given credit. They should elect their own leadership. And if they fit the the bills that, of revitalized, entity, they should run their own territory.
Revitalize means, someone a little younger, a little more life, a little more vision for the future than Mahmoud Abbas, right?
Yeah, he's not the most revitalized person.
Yeah. You'd have to, feed him youth hormones or something.
And I'm afraid that, if we look at the current leadership in Gaza, the persons that might be potential leaders, we are not very optimistic. This is true, of course, in Judea and Samaria as well. We are facing a dysfunctional political entity, and I wish they would be like Egypt or Jordan, but they are not. They cannot produce a leadership that is capable of being honest and running their own, entity. If I take a look at the Palestinian National Movement, they produce two states, talking about two-state solution. They produce two states, one almost failed state in the West Bank, and another terrorist states in Gaza. So those are the successes of the Palestinian National Movement, which are very, unfortunately, a very bad omen, what might happen in Gaza after we retreat. Yeah,
they're more interested in destroying Israel than building their own country. That's the problem. Look, when the truce was first announced a couple of weeks ago, we wound up with a 1-week truce when it was first announced, a ceasefire. Israel called it a pause. Hamas was celebrating it. We've won. They tried to tell the people this is a permanent truce, and really didn't even tell them this was only temporary for the hostages, but they were declaring victory. At what point Israel is trying to achieve its war aims and declare victory, but at what point can you prevent Hamas from saying we come out of this victorious? Because what they did on October 7th, really, they'll probably be boasting about it for years to come.
The day we take over all Gaza is the day of Israel's victory. We have to conquer all Gaza.
All the way up to the Rafah crossing.
Right.
Yeah.
All the way to the Rafah crossing. All Gaza will be in the hands of the Israeli military, and all Hamas corps, all Hamas leadership will be at the IDF mercy. This is a day that will be victorious.
Okay.
This is the day that everybody in the Middle East will understand that Hamas are paying a dear price for aggression against Israel.
Yeah. May that day come soon. We really thank you for your time, Professor Ephraim Inbar of the Jerusalem Institute for Security and Strategy, one of Israel's leading geostrategic thinkers. I really appreciate your time. It's good to see you again. Good to see you in good health, my friend.
Good to see you, and I wish everybody, Merry Christmas soon, and
yes,
Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah, yes. All right, that's our time for today's ICEJ webinar. We thank you for joining us. We hope you join us again next week. We'll have another webinar at 3 p.m. on Thursday afternoon next week. Stay tuned at the top of the hour. We're going to have our daily global prayer gathering. We hope to see you there. That is every day at 4 p.m. Israel time. And God bless you from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us for this informative webinar. Be sure to subscribe to our social media channels or visit our website at icej.org for upcoming webinars and more ICEJ exclusive content.